It's good to be here with you guys. I'm looking forward to having a fun discussion and chat with you. So what we got today, I'm going to be going through a few of the models and principles of insights to healing. Just gonna to help us to understand the mind-body connection and the power we have to heal ourselves from within. We're also going to be exploring some meaningful interventions that we can apply to help to create like profound self-healing. And hopefully it's a really engaging and insightful conversation. So we're going to share some principles from what James told me, from what Joe's told me, and Sue. These sort of sessions, and Nadine, I think my sister Nadine, she did one of these recently. Maybe some of you guys were able to sort of join that, and she said they're really quite fun, engaging conversations. So looking forward to hopefully making it sort of engaging and insightful conversation, and to start talking about some of those topics, about not just symptoms of the body, but symptoms of the mind as well. So if you know that you'd really love to hear about some specifics, specific symptoms, whether they be symptoms of the body or of the mind, then be sure to write them in the chat, so that I can sort of, when we get to the discussion point, we can make sure that we sort of I bring them up at specific points in the presentation. Does that make sense? Yeah. Cool. All right, so just the little housekeeping bits. Like, this is for informational purposes only. If you're suffering with a physical or psychological illness, then be sure to follow the usual channels to go to your general practitioner, medical doctor, get your diagnosis and treatment plan and everything like that. This is for informational purposes only, for us to have a fun discussion. Hopefully a bit progressive onto some sort of thoughts. So have to get that out of the way. So that's all good and done. I'm going to go through, I've got a slide presentation put together for you, and I'm going to go show you what's going to be in that. But first, I just wanted to share a little bit of my journey into this work, so that you can kind of get a sense of where this has come from. It's not just sort of something I've just recently put together. Does that make sense? Does that feel good? Cool. Nice. I know some of you, I'm just trying to pick out some faces. I know a few people, but I think many of you, it's actually the first time I'm getting to meet you. So that's very cool too. But yeah. So you probably know our family story, because it's massively linked to the M.O.E Foundation. And kind of my oldest brother Darren, and maybe my sister Nadine. We have another brother, Nick, as well. But one of the major sort of events that happened in our lives was when Mum, she died during an epileptic seizure, back in year 2000. And I was 17 at the time. And it was a couple of months after my 17th birthday. It was a massive, shocking event that happened. Like, Mum just sort of, she would sometimes feel sick and tired and stuff, and she was tired this one day on a Monday, and she had a grand mal seizure, an epileptic seizure, and during that she sort of suffocated, and she passed away. And it was a massive, like, shocking event for us. We didn't really see it coming, and took it pretty hard. And for a couple of years, I was really struggling, but then kind of Darren sat me down, and he kind of asked me a couple of questions. He said, if you keep going in the same trajectory, where are you going to be in 10 years? And I wasn't going to be anywhere good. I wasn't doing very well. And he said, where do you want to be instead? And it was kind of anywhere different. And he said, what do you want to do with your life? And it just came up from me. I hadn't really thought the thought consciously before, but it just came through to me clear as a bell. When we sometimes get that voice that comes up from inside of us, that sort of talks to us, and it was just, I want to help people with their health. And it was just like bang, it was clear as day. Like, I want to help people with their health. I want, if I dig deeper into it, is, I want to help people like Mom, people that struggling with serious chronic illness, and I want to help them to get better. Because I know, I had a deep knowing, and maybe some of you guys have that knowing too, that illness isn't the way. We're not supposed to really be ill and be sick. It's a part of the journey, But it seemed like illness and sickness, it was just rising, rising. People, 1 in 2 are going to get cancer or die of heart disease, and one in 3 are going to get cancer. And these illnesses are just going, up and up and up. And it didn't really seem like the solutions were really coming. So from inside of me, it was just, I want to help people with their health. And I was 19 years old at the time. And so we figured out the way for me to get into the health and wellness industry was to become a sports massage therapist, personal trainer, and nutrition coach. And so I got on an intensive training program. And as soon as I started to learn about the body, about the 9 systems of the body, the immune system, the nervous system, the cardiovascular, respiratory, and how to help to sort of support that through exercise, through nutrition, through sort of tissue work and massage and massage therapy and sports massage therapy, I really started to come alive, and I really started to get really excited. I was excited in a way that I'd never been before. And I was really inspired about learning about the body and learning about what we can put into place to help people to heal themselves from within, and with techniques, both outside in techniques such as nutrition and exercise and therapies, as well as inside out techniques. But the inside out sort of side of things didn't really develop in me until a bit later. I started working in the City of London, and I was working with people in high stress situations, directors all the way down to sort of ground level, but people working in the City of London, quite high stressed environment, high pressure environment. And I was working with people with diabetes, heart disease, obesity, musculoskeletal issues, the whole host of things. And I was getting some good successes with the exercise, the nutrition stuff. And that was what was making some profound changes. But because of my character, because I wanted to help people that really struggled the most, I was sent challenging clients. And so most of my experiences, it was failures. I was like, damn it, like how can I break through with these people? It's the basic stuff. The basic principles aren't working. And more I started to understand it was about more their inner workings, more their thoughts and their feelings. And let me just see if I need to let this one in. I'm not sure if Jane is still there. Let's say that. So it was more like their thoughts, their feelings there. And I started to study NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. For those that are quite, I'm sure you guys have all sort of touched on that. You're in the coaching world. So I started to study that in 2005 and getting trained in coaching, and started to read a lot more progressive books, maybe a bit more like spiritual books, like The Power of Now with Eckhart Tolle, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Covey, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl. And I started to sort of explore more like spiritual books, more sort of psychological concepts. And I started to see more of the profound impact our beliefs and our values and our thoughts and our feelings and our experiences have on our physiology. And I started to apply some of these things. Running parallel with that, I'd started to study martial arts. And in the study of martial arts, I got to a world championships in China, and I got disqualified from the world championships in China because I threw in a late kick, a late head kick, and it was an illegal move. But for a moment, I lost my mind. So my body, physiologically, I was in amazing shape, really strong, very powerful, lots of vitality. But in that moment, in that fight, I lost my mind, and I wanted to. There was fear in me, and I wanted to finish the fight, and I got disqualified. And so I came back from that tournament. Let me just read. Body keeps score. Yeah, that's a great one too. There'll be some notes in the, if you want to share in the chat. But yeah, and I came back from there feeling really depressed because I'd put in a lot of work. I'd put in a lot of focus, and my family, Nick and Nadine, they'd come out to China to see me fight, and I got disqualified. And so I felt like I'd let so many people down. People had invested in me to help me to fight and all this sort of thing. And I was working with a coach at the time. And I said, Alistair, my coach, I need to get control of my mind. I know that it's like my childhood stuff is still, if I set myself a goal to be world champion within 5 years. This was 1 year in, and I had a model in my mind of what the world champion was. And I said, if I'm going to ever get there to be that world champion, I'm going to need to deal with my childhood stuff. And so he introduced me to a teacher called Dr. John DeMartini. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of him. He's a cool teacher. He just won sort of human behavioral specialist of the year, the sort of global one or whatever the other year. He's a really profound teacher, and he's got some really profound techniques. And I went and studied his work in 2008. January, I started to study with him. And then I did his sort of teacher training and his courses. And he's got some really powerful transformational psychology techniques to help you to dissolve fear, anger, sadness, hurt, guilt, shame through a sort of scientific process of questioning, to question the way you think and feel. And I went through a major breakthrough in my life. There was an event that happened when I was a child that sort of I hadn't really let go of, and there was a lot of fear attached to it and a lot of anger attached to it. And in that process I went through, I broke through on it. I changed the way I thought about the whole event. I saw the gift in it. I saw the wisdom in it. I saw how it was love, and it changed my complete sort of physiology and psychology started to change. So I felt like water. Like, I don't know, Bruce Lee sometimes says like, be like water. I felt like water. I felt like I'd been holding on to this trauma inside of my unconscious mind. And so inside of my physiology, it said that the body is linked to the deepest layer of our unconscious mind. The body is linked to the deepest layer of our unconscious mind. So the body keeps score, but also the mind keeps score. Your unconscious mind stores everything we've ever been through, everything we've ever experienced, all the thoughts and feelings. And this was sitting there deep in my unconscious, and it was ruling me and running me in so many ways. Sociologically, the way I interacted with people, physiologically, the tension and compression I held in my body, psychologically, my fears, my anxieties, my beliefs about myself, others, the world, what was possible. And in that process of changing the way I felt and thought about that event, that all started to change and morph. And my body felt like water. I felt like pure energy. My musculoskeletal system changed. I went from being quite restricted through my hips to being able to do leg kicks up to the side of my head and full splits. My bronchial asthma just released. My lungs capacity was so much better. My heart started to work better. My resting heart rate dropped down to like 34 beats a minute. I had so many different physiological changes that happened, but also psychological. The way I thought about the world, the way I interacted with other people changed. My thirst for knowledge and wisdom and information went up. My vocabulary started to change. I started to read a lot more books. I just wanted to learn about the world. And that was a massive breakthrough. And it really taught me the power we have, well, the impact the experiences that we go through on an individual level have on us on a deep layer, but the power we have to change by changing the way we think and we feel about events, how we can change our whole experience of our physiology and our state of health and well-being in our body and mind. But I still didn't know like how it worked. So it was 2008 still, and I wanted to know, like, how does it work in all of us individually? Because we all, me, Darren, Nick, Nadine, we all went through the same event, but it impacted us all very differently and uniquely. And every single one of us, we go through so many unique scenarios and conflict, stress and trauma we experience. And it impacts us and influences us in such a unique way. And so I wanted to know, well, how does that work? Is there a way to understand the mind-body connection in that specific way? Fortunately, that coach that I was working with, Alistair, he introduced me to a system called meta medicine or meta health. It was a system that one of his friends was going to, she had breast cancer, and she had found that this had a lot of insight for breast cancer, and they were having good results at helping people to transform it. So she was going to this course. So I went to another weekend training in 2008, and I started to study meta medicine. And it was the principles, so many principles about how the mind body connection works. And it was beautiful because on that training, I was learning some of the models I'm going to share with you today. And it helped me to just map and understand how it worked. And I was able to understand mum's epilepsy. I was able to understand, reverse engineer my bronchial asthma that I had, and migraines and pain and musculoskeletal stuff. And I was able to instantly start to implement it with my clients that I was working with that were having heart disease, diabetes, blood pressure issues. And it massively sped up the speed at which we could have transformation going on in their life in really surprising ways. It was quite shocking and surprising in many ways. Since 2008, I started to teach it, to study it, to become a practitioner, master trainer of the work. Both those two systems, and start to teach people how to implement this into their life. And that's what I do now. That's what I'm sharing with the Lighthouse Healing Academy. I've done it around the world. I lived in the US for 7 years. I'm back here in the UK now, and I launched Lighthouse Healing Academy. And that's what I'm here to do, is help to teach these principles to help people to empower themselves in the area of health and well-being and make profound shifts happen. So let me go into the presentation, because I know I sometimes, like, I'm a time optimist. I always think that you have more time than you think. So what we're going to go through today, this evening, a few bits. So we're going to talk about the synchronous unity of organ, brain, mind, social experience, and the sort of new science of what we call biopsychosocial healthcare system. We're going to look at the 2 phases and 9 points of healing model. I mentioned in the launch to my program that I've got coming up on the 20th of January, I'll talk to you more about it at the end, that if I could teach you just one model that could really change the way you think and feel about health and disease, this would be a cool foundational model. There's a few others that I love, but for the process of this evening's talk, the 2 phases and 9 points of healing model or disease model, yeah, if you can just learn that one, it's so cool. It helps us to understand the process of illness. We're going to have a real brief look at our brain as what we call a relay system, or an overdetermined relay system. We're gonna have this is a piece that I want to be the discussion piece, is symptoms as meaningful biological responses. So many times we catch an illness and we always ask ourselves, why me, why now? But we feel it's bad, terrible, wrong. And this work, as people sort of study more into it, one of the beautiful things that happens is a shift from fear and concern about symptoms and experiences, and more curiosity to what's the meaning of this symptom, what's my body telling me, and how do I navigate it. So we'll have a look and a discussion a little bit about symptoms as meaningful biological processes or responses. We're going to have a look at the an overview of the transformational healing model, and actually what I use with my clients to help them to make profound shifts and healing happen. And yeah, a bit of a group discussion. So let's get into it. So one of the main questions I ask is, one of the first things for us to sort of explore is, what's the current landscape of well-being, and what's the current sort of paradigm and thoughts and feeling. So if I asked you a question, is do you perceive yourself to be like a multi-layered being with many parts to you? Is that something you've sort of explored before? And if things were to be chunked into sort of 3 main categories of how we look at health mostly, what would you say are the 3 main categories of how we break things down? Now there's some text stuff.
I'm not quite sure what you mean, John.
Yeah, yeah, it's a bit of a tricky question. Let me just go into this bit, and then we can explore other things. So the question is like, what are typically described as being the three main elements? Yeah, that's it. So Lisa's got it. Yeah, and Becky's got it as well. So you got it. So somehow my stupid question actually made sense to someone. That's good. But yeah, so we sort of chunk them into the mind, body, spirit, right? This is how the landscape is. We sort of think of things of we're body, mind, spirit as a connection like that, and for the most part, we for me, it's soul, spirit, body, and physical body. Nice. Yeah, I like those two. I use soul a lot in all my work, but yeah, if for the most part, still the landscape is that we still in the general population. Maybe you guys are a bit more progressive, but we do still sort of separate things as body, mind, spirit. So body is still really taken by the medical profession. And the mind is still sort of psychologists, psychotherapists, and counselors and things like that. And the spirit is still pretty much in the realm of the church. Do you believe that still to be true? Yeah, no, Helen. Yeah, no, I don't believe it to be true. But do you believe that it's still, in a way, how people view things? Do you still think it's still a way that it's sort of interacted with?
I think it depends on people's experience, John.
Yeah.
I think
Yep.
that some people have had experiences where they've ended up searching for some sort of spiritual connection, that, you know, something's happened in their lives.
Yeah.
And I think there's much more of a shift towards knowing that we are more than just mind and body,
Yeah.
and that there is a soul. I think
Yeah.
it also depends on the time of life as well, potentially.
Yeah, probably in your 20s you're too confused with all sorts of other stuff to really be thinking deeply about anything maybe a bit more deep. Yeah, I remember always getting told like, oh, you're quite a deep thinker, and it was like, no, for me it was just general thinking about life. But like you say, it's because sometimes we get woken up by a calling from something that happens in our own experience, that makes us sort of search and go a little bit further. And I agree with you. Like what has been really quite beautiful is before I went to America in 2010, talking about these concepts was a little bit more, it was tricky. Like I used to get a lot more backlash. But since coming back from America, there's a lot more, the vernacular has changed. People are a lot more open to talking about concepts about the soul now. And people have read a lot more books. It's really grown quite a lot. Have you guys noticed that? There's a massive shift that's happened. COVID has disrupted a lot, and I know, like, I don't want to make this a talk about COVID and stuff, because it's just a whole load of emotional stuff that we haven't got time to unpack and resolve right now. But yeah, it has disrupted a lot, and it's put a lot of fear in the field, and a lot of uncertainty. And so it's brought up a lot of symptomatology in people, which is always beautiful, because it's always an opportunity to see, wow, what was inside of me, like the only way to find out what's inside an orange is to squeeze it, and out comes the orange juice. And so sometimes life gives us a real intense like squeeze just to see what's inside of us. And so if we get squeezed by life, and then what comes out of us, we're like, oh, I've got some work to do. But it brings to us an awareness of what was inside, what fears and concerns were sitting there, maybe just below the level of consciousness. But when the pressure was increased, then we got to see it sort of come out, so that we could sort of see it and face it. And because if you can't see it, you can't heal it. So we had to know what was inside, so that we can face it, process it, and then move through it consciously. Yeah, fear was there. There was a distinction between being spiritual and being, spirit. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, so good. You guys are on the right, or the same track as me, same sort of thought process as me. There's a much bigger shift towards a different sort of sense of spirituality, um, without needing the dogmatic sort of thinking and constructs of certain religions. And that's a beautiful change that has started to really emerge more and more. So in this work, what we sort of look at, we really start to look at different levels of our being. So we look at like the pure consciousness state of us, and sometimes we have different practices that we use to tap into our that state inside of ourselves. And you guys kind of, I'm sure, and give me feedback, know what it's like when you're in a kind of like a Zen state. You're in like maybe you're practicing some sort of mindfulness or meditation or flow state. Maybe you're sharing your work and you're in your flow, or maybe you're skiing or exercising, or doing something that, some sort of yoga practice or qigong or something where you're really connecting with the beingness state of you, where you feel, calm, cool, you've got control of your breathing, and you've tapped into that. Have some of you been able to tap into that space, or tap into that on a fairly regular basis? But so you can write that in there, but then sometimes we know what it's like when we're not in that space, and we're more like, we're just fighting fires and we're doing life. We wake up, we get coffee, we boom boom boom, and we're going, and we get more stuck into that monkey mind. So we're sort of recognizing, though, that there's this different parts of ourselves. There's this beingness part, and then there's also this mind part. There's this sort of mind field, if you like, of all of our emotions, our thoughts, our beliefs, our reactive mind patterns, our triggers, our unconscious triggers, things that sort of pull us and take us out of our center. And that could be interactions with our friends, our family, our loved ones, our bosses. It could be this massive social territorial conflicting event that's happened through COVID and stuff. These things can really trigger what's going on inside of us. And we have that as another element. We also have our body and our organs, our meridians, our energy fields, our organs, our tissues, our systems of our body. And some people are learning to play more and more with their chi, or their energy, or their life force, or their prana, or their auric field. And then there's also this other element, is how that is all interacting with our social environment. So in this work, what we sort of start to talk about is that there's a biopsychosocial healthcare model. It's an integrative model of healthcare, and it says that we have organs and tissues, we have the layer of the brain, we have our emotions and our thoughts and our beliefs, and it's all how we interact with our social environment, and that there's a synchronous unity between all of those things happening together. So I was going to do a little experiment with you guys. Is one of the things that we learn is that the body really doesn't know the difference between real and imagined. So whatever you're thinking and feeling, it's responding to and making changes to. This is kind of like obvious when we're watching movies. Maybe some people are more influenced by movies than others, but you can be watching something on the screen of a movie. You're not really in a threatening situation, but you can get heart palpitations, and you can get cold sweats, and you can get stressed if you're watching a horror movie or something. Or you can be watching something funny and having a completely different physiological experience. The same is true for our dreams. When we have dreams, it can change the way is what's going on in our physiology instantaneously. For me, like, one way I sort of think about this is, if ever I think about salt and vinegar discos. They're like a crisp in the UK chip. I'm not sure where everyone from on this call is from actually, but whenever I think about salt and vinegar discos, I start to salivate right away. It makes an instantaneous physiological shift happen in me purely by thinking about that food. I don't know if you guys have got some sort of food that does that to you. Ice cream and chocolate, pickled onions, and the discos. Nice. Somebody else has got the discos as well. But yeah, ice cream and chocolate. Yeah, and as soon as you think about that sort of food or something, it can start to have a feeling for you. Lisa mentioned the laughing yoga thing. This is a really good therapy, like laughter yoga. One of my friends, she was a teacher of it. And yeah, it's such a beautiful thing. There's even a video on YouTube where you can see there's a guy on the tube, and he starts to laugh, and then somebody else starts to laugh with him and stuff, and then all of a sudden it's just this ripple that goes through the whole tube, and they're all just laughing, and it's so infectious and so good. But yeah, it can change the chemistry of our body. And yeah, it can be really good for us. So like laughter yoga, we don't laugh as much as we probably did as kids. So it can really lighten the spirit. Haribos, but the discos also did it for me too. Yeah. Mango and raspberries. Yeah. So we can sort of see that we've got these things that as soon as we think about them, we've not actually got them in our hand right now, but it can start to make changes physiologically. Our salivary glands actually start to produce saliva purely through the image that I held in my mind, or through the thought that I thought about. And this is true for all things. It's true for positive events. One of the things about us, if you ever looked into the work of Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, one of the main things is sort of shared by Robert Sapolsky. It's a really kind of a cool piece of work. But one of the main things it sort of showed is that animals don't ruminate over their stressful events. They just sort of have an experience and then move beyond it. Whereas us as humans, we think and we feel and we ruminate and we go over and again what we've gone through. And if it's a good experience or a stressful experience, and we seem to have more of a preference to keep going over stressful experiences. I don't hope that's not just me. I think that's sort of a general thing. But and it can keep making physiological changes happen in our body. But it's quite powerful and profound just to think about it, because most of us, we sort of somehow we've separated the mind and body, and we sort of think that when we have a disease or an illness or a symptom in our body, that's nothing to do with what we've been thinking or feeling about, and nothing to do with what we've been going through sociologically. But actually, when we look at it logically, and we actually break it down with some simple examples of, a food that changes the way what's going on in the salivary glands, it becomes obvious. And it becomes obvious, wow, of course, like, what I'm thinking about, what I'm feeling about, what I'm going through is going to change my physiology. There's a beautiful science called epigenetics, and some beautiful work by a teacher called Dr. Bruce Lipton that goes into the biology of belief. And it's a beautiful set of work about the specifics of the science of how our thoughts and our feelings and our experiences change us on a biological level, on a genetic level. It's really profound work. But just thinking about it from this level, just practically, yeah, when I think and feel whatever I'm going through, it changes what's going through in my biology. And I'm sure you guys can think of some experiences in your own life where where you were in a situation, or you were in a social circumstance, an event, and you could probably even think about it now, and you could think about a negative social experience that you went through. And if you kind of took your mind to that event now, you could start to feel some feelings. You could start to feel some tensions and compressions. Dr. Joe Dispenza is also good. Yeah. And you could start to feel, wow, like that still lives within me somewhere, just the memory of that event. And then if you were to shake that off, and you could also think of a positive event that you went through, something that felt really great and amazing for you, and felt really wonderful for you, and was one of maybe the peak moments of your life that felt really good. And if you started to think and feel about that event, where were you? What were you seeing? And you can do this now. What were you seeing? What were you feeling? What were you hearing? And you could start to get into it, and you could start to get into that moment, and you might notice, wow, like you do relax. Maybe if things open up, maybe there's a warmth or changes that happen to you physiologically. And that could be cool to do, is because, sometimes we get stuck in a negative place. And this is a cool little anchoring technique, just where you just anchor in positive events. I know we have some people on here that do a lot of that work. The author's name again, sorry, was Dr. Bruce Lipton. Dr. Bruce Lipton, Lipton, The Biology of Belief. So yeah, so we look at things in that there's a direct correlation between, and there's a synchronous unity between our organs, our mind, and our brain. And that when you have an impact on one level, it instantaneously makes a shift on all other levels. I'm going to go through with you now that model, that 2 phases and 9 points of disease model, because this model it's cool, it's awesome. Yeah, this model, it was one of the first models I learned on that weekend training, and it helped me to make sense of so many other concepts and bring them together. It's the sort of one of the favorite models I like to share with people, because it helps to make a lot of sense. So has anyone heard before of the autonomic nervous system? Autonomic nervous system. Yeah, fight or flight, that's it. So yeah, you might have heard those sort of terms, Lisa, instead like more like fight or flight. So we have our body, and we haven't really studied since, biology at school, maybe. So many years ago, we'd have studied in GCSE biology or O-level biology, whatever it would have been then. We would have studied a little bit about the body and our biology, and we would have, or we've read later, and we would have learned about our nervous system and our autonomic nervous system. So this model is massively linked to our autonomic nervous system. In the upcoming training, I'm going to be going through a lot more about the body's 2 main stress responses, the autonomic nervous system and the HPA axis. But in this one, this model is massively linked to our autonomic nervous system. And so, yeah, you're starting to sort of do the 2 sides. So you've got the sympathetic side, which is kind of like our accelerator in a car, ramps things up, gets things moving. And then you have like the parasympathetic side, that sort of calms things down, slows things down. And then you've got the vagus nerve, which kind of helps to sort of manage the both. So throughout our life, during our regular day-night cycles, we've got a typical flow where we are more sort of sympathetic nervous system dominant when we wake up. We also have like more cortisol, which is a stress hormone, as we're waking up. And we have a general sort of like cycle throughout the day, have times when we're a bit more active and alert and everything. And then sometimes we're a bit more sort of needing some rest and recuperation. Those are the 2 sides. And then we'll go through an event, something that happens to us. And it's what we call a UDIN. I actually didn't bring those letters up, but you can write it down. It's UDIN. And it's something that we go through, which is unexpected, dramatic. We feel isolated in the experience, and we have no strategy for dealing with it in the moment. And when we go through an event like that, such as when we started to get all the news about the COVID, but many other things, a shocking event happens that challenges us, either in our our yin world, our home life, and our, intimate relationships and our closer stuff, or in our sort of like broader world, our job, our career, the larger, the world around us, a shocking event happens, something happens, which is a significant emotional event. Something like, we lose a job, or something happens to a loved one, or, a relationship challenge. There's many layers and levels of conflict that we can go through, and it's so unique to us as individuals. There's the big T stuff, the big trauma stuff, like the loss and the grief and the major changes. But then there's also the smaller stuff, the little conflicts that we go through that can start to make changes in our body. Do you get a sense of the different types of conflict that people go through? Do you want to share some ideas? Yeah, breakdown of a relationship. Relationships are so massive. They're such a key area for people, because they're the relationships are the place where we let people in the closest, and we show our rawness often. And we build that bond and we let them in energetically on so many layers of our being, that then when something happens, and because we've all got a load of baggage, that's a generalization actually, but many people have got much baggage when it comes to relationships, and weird stuff happens, and we have late relationship challenges that can be really intense and really emotional. When I get into the psychological symptoms, the relationships are the deepest wound that caused the greatest problem in the psychology, and something we call conflict constellations. So in the more advanced elements of this work, we're talking about psychological and behavioral symptoms, and we talk about them as conflict constellations. And when we get to relationship breakups, affairs, cheating, all these things, they are so deep and so wounding to the mind and to the being, and they cause they're the major cause of the major manias and depressions that go on in our psychology. And that's why when we're talking about those and we're teaching those, we actually have to take quite a lot of time and multiple days to actually, we talk about them in terms of the Casanova constellation and the Casanova and nymphomania. There's a few concepts that are sort of layering in, but all psychological disorder is on a spectrum. We all have sort of a degree of some things, a little bit of anxiety, maybe a little bit of depression, a little bit of paranoia, a little bit of megalomania, a little bit of mythomania. We tell lies to ourselves and others. There's a whole load of them that we sort of process out and sort of can chunk down the different behaviors of them, and the underlying conflict and trauma that leads to the development of them, and why they are created as survival mechanisms to help us to survive the life that we're perceiving and experiencing. But yeah, they're on a spectrum. But some of the biggest ones are the nymphomania and the Casanova, and it makes it's such a huge concept in those ones. What else have you got? Unexpected injury or unexpected health issues. All of a sudden, any area of our life, like spiritually, mentally, vocationally, financially, travel, intimate relationship, family, social, or physical, we can all of a sudden get a shocking event in any area of that life that can really sort of throw us out of balance, and really cause us a conflict and a worry and a stress, like you say, Shannara, an injury or an unexpected health issue. Tessa, when all of a sudden we get a financial challenge, and all of a sudden we get a cost that we didn't expect, all of a sudden comes in, a bill that we didn't expect to pay, your car breaks down or something, and your supply challenges your demand, and it gets you in that state of stress. Exactly. Moving house, huge one. That's another one of the major ones, right? Job change, house change, relationship change. They're the kind of the three biggest ones. So, but yeah, like you say, Becky, as well, supporting a sick loved one. It's so huge. There's so many of us that have people that are going through something in our life. And maybe, you know, our own life is kind of well managed and organized, but all of a sudden now we have this new challenge that we have to help. Maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a loved one, maybe it's a partner. All of a sudden something shocking happens. And it's like, oh, this new pressure that we're under, and we go into strategies of how to survive it. And Maxine says, you know, even the abuse in relationships, sexual, and these things, lots of different things. Burglary, Helen, yeah, exactly. Attacks on the home, you know, burglary happens. It's like shocking. It just sort of takes your whole world, like you feel vulnerable, and it drives a load of stress in you. And so, yeah, those are some great examples of a conflict stress, a conflict, a UDIN event. And once something like that has impacted us, we then go into what's called the stress phase, so a stress active phase. And the more impact, the less strategy we have to deal with it, the more stress we can feel about it, and the bigger what we call the conflict mass can be. So the volume of stress and the intensity of stress, the more coping mechanisms we've got to maintain and manage our own sort of state of calm, the better. But the less we have, the more it takes over our mind and takes over our life, and it becomes bigger. And we go through that conflict event for the period of time that the stress is still there, before we've created a strategy around it, before we've returned to our safety, our stability. We're in stress. Different organs and tissues of the body respond differently under stress or under what's called regeneration. So some symptoms of the body and mind, most of the psychological symptoms are in the stress phase. But like anxiety and depression and mania and paranoia and megalomania. Megalomania actually runs the whole process. Mythomania, lots of different things. They happen when you're in that intense stage of stress. And then something will shift, right? So we don't stay. Sometimes we're under stress for a moment. Sometimes we're under stress for maybe a few hours, maybe a few days, maybe a few weeks, maybe a few months, maybe a few years. Some people have been in a stressful situation and scenario. I'm currently working with a client, 12 years she's been under a stressful situation, and she's developed something intense that we're working through. And sometimes we've been under a stress for many years, but sometimes it's a lot shorter. But then something shifts, right? So we go through some sort of change in the way that we think or feel or our experience. On one of those levels that we looked at before, the layers and levels, there's a change. We either go through an internal shift in the way that we think and we feel about this thing, and we go through some sort of level of personal growth. In the work, I talk about it often as solutions versus resolutions. So sometimes we have practical solutions, and we have a practical change. I'm gonna grow beyond this in some practical way. And then we have what we call solutions. And a solution is an evolution on the growth of your person, that maybe you've been repeating experience over and over again. You keep kind of finding a similar relationship, you keep kind of experiencing a similar thing in work. It just keeps repeating itself in new forms and new fashions and with new actors, but it keeps repeating itself. But the real healing work is when we go through a profound shift, and we learn the deep lessons, and we then no longer need that teacher in our life, because we've learned the lesson that we were here to learn. And that's the true art of healing, is to when we can get to those solution places. But sometimes just reaching for a practical resolution is what we can manage. And so, yeah, all is good. But something shifts and changes, right? So maybe just because Helen's there with the burglary or assault or whatever, maybe maybe you get a better defense system in your house, or you get stronger windows or a better door, or change your locks, or some sort of different security system or something. So you make some sort of change. You maybe even start to empower yourself, get some defense classes, self-defense classes, start to learn something like that, and that starts to help you to feel empowered. But you get your power back from this fearful place, and that starts to shift and change your experience. Let me just read what Helen's written. My partner and I have been talking about this repeating pattern that he's been experiencing. Fascinating. It is the same scenario, different players. Yeah, there's another model that I wanted to share with you guys tonight, but if I go off on that, could take us like a long time. So I couldn't fit it in today, but it's on the other course that I'm doing. But it's really beautiful, where we talk about solutions and resolutions, evolutions and resolutions, how we just keep to, repeating those same patterns. And it's often like stuff that's set up in 0 to 7 years old. We do a lot of that. We have our imprint stage in our life, where we go through an event, we're really looking at our major role models, our mother and our father often, or our major caretakers, whoever that was. And we are observing, and we're taking so much in, sort of unconsciously and consciously. And sometimes we just keep repeating patterns over and over again in different scenarios, whether it be with other males, in career or something, or other females in other areas, relationships or whatever. And we keep repeating these similar sort of patterns over and over again. And it's the same thing, is if we can't see it, we can't heal it. And so it's like, this is where we get to the soul level. Is like, I believe our soul is so intelligent, and our super consciousness is so intelligent. They just keep bringing lessons to us for us to see them, to understand them, and then to truly do the deep work healing, so that we move beyond them and we have an evolution on the journey of our soul, to bring something more of our empowerment in, more of our truth in, more of our soul's purpose through in this life. We get over the lessons. But yeah, I love talking about that, as how we repeat these patterns in our life, and they're there for a reason. But whenever we are repeating those patterns, what can happen is the symptoms that our body is that's linked to them can get worse or stronger. But when we go through a change, so if we just bring it back now just to this one example, we go through a change. We change the way we think and we feel, or our environment, and we go through what's called a regeneration phase. So this is a parasympathetic dominant stage. And let me just read what Lisa's written. Also, John, don't you think that if we're given misinformation when we are young by our parents or other significant adults, that also makes it difficult for us in later life? Absolutely, because it's our framework, it's our paradigm. In the other course we start to look at paradigm is where's our model of the world, our map of the world, what forms it. And so what we're told by our parents, and what we're told by our culture, and what we absorb about what's true and not, about the nature of life, and who we are, of course that's gonna impact us, because we're like a tree. We have, that's our sort of our environment, and then we have our trunk, our thoughts and our beliefs, and then we have our branches and the fruits of our life, and what we're able to create, and health, and our well-being, and our state of health and well-being, physiologically and psychologically, is one of the fruits that we create in our life from the roots, which is our perception, our paradigm. And so if we're getting sick fruits, the fruits of our life are not healthy, not vibrant, not vital, not life-giving, life enriching, then there's something going on in the rest of the rest of your tree of life. And sometimes that's an issue in the paradigm, and the information that we were maybe given when we were young, that we absorbed when we were young, that was maybe not so true. Absolutely. Good point. But when we go through this shift in our stress, and something changes, we go through what's called into the parasympathetic phase, so the regeneration phase. And this is where we're going to get tiredness, fatigue, and we're going to need to rest because we've just been through something stressful, and now, you know, we need to process it. This was one of the gifts of actually COVID and this lockdowns and stuff, is it gave people the opportunity to sleep and catch up and rest. I think so many of us had been running for so much of our life, just like living on adrenaline, and you push. I got to push. I got to drive through. I got to, you know, do this. And this gave us an opportunity where we had to be stuck. And I think many of us slept a lot or rested a lot, or picked up other things. But we all noticed going through that, which is a key part of our healing. Once we've gone through some of that, and I'm going to go through some more distinctions of those in a moment, we go through something called a healing peak. This is where epileptic or epileptoid crisis happen. So if you've ever seen in the animal kingdom, this is a natural biological process. If you've ever seen in the natural animal kingdom, like a video on YouTube or something, the animal will get chased, like an antelope's getting chased by a lion or something. It gets caught, and then there's a specific video where a hyena then comes along to try and steal the prey, and the lioness starts to fight with the hyena, and then you see this antelope, it sort of goes through this sort of shaking fit. It has like a spasms, and then it gets up and it runs off. And so this is a thing that happens in nature, is you go through a stressful event, it builds up all this tension in your body, and then something happens, it changes, and then you shake. There's a shaking that happens, you know, that you start to shake, and you shake it off. Many of us suppress it and we think it's not good to be shaken. I have to rigid and stiff and stick it down. But it's actually a natural biological process for us to sort of shake it off. That's why there's some other techniques called like trauma release exercises, or TRE, which help to stimulate us into a place where we can actually let out the shakes in our body. Some other therapies, you do shaking therapies, and other therapies like myofascial release, where you actually unwind the tensions that are stored in your body from the traumas that you've held. But yeah, it's this natural process called an epileptic or an epileptoid crisis. Heart attacks happen here, strokes happen here, asthma attacks happen here, migraines happen just after here. And then once you're through that biological process, which is really a check of your organism, you go into what's called regeneration phase B. And regeneration phase B is, again, it's the parasympathetic phase. Your appetite will come back here. So you're more relaxed, but not as intense. It's like if any of you have ever had the flu, colds and flus are actually a regeneration phase symptom. So it's trauma release exercises, Helen. Yeah, so colds and flus are actually a regeneration phase symptom. So the body was stressed by something before then, and that was the stress and everything that was built around it actually coming out of your body. But you may have noticed you had a couple of days or so where you were really intense. It was like, oh man, you were aching, pain, maybe fever, you were really sick. And then maybe you had like a day where, you had an uplift and you were like, oh, I'm over this. And then maybe after that, you felt a little bit sick again. You're like, oh no, I've come back in. Sometimes you can recycle and go back to the start of regeneration. But other times it's just that you've had a healing peak go on where you've had an uplift, and then you get your appetite back and you're moving back towards health. Point 8 is where I don't know if you're seeing the chat box. I don't think you guys can see my chat box. But yeah, so point 8 is where this process is finished. And then point 9 is where you go back to normality, back to your regular day-night cycle kind of thing. So that is the 2 phases and 9 points of disease model. If you can just start to understand, the main thing to understand is that illness is a process. It's not like you've got a cancer or you've got a sickness or you haven't. There was a there was an initial event that happened which started a biological process. There's stress phases and there's regeneration phases. When we get into like the chronic pattern, you know, these programs, they can get triggered over and over and over again every time you recycle an experience in your life again. There's also when you're running multiple conflicts at the same time together, which often happens in our life, that's when you can get more the sort of psychological. But if we can just start to understand, wow, is my symptom that I'm experiencing, is it a stress phase symptom or is it a regeneration phase symptom? Do I mainly get it when I'm stressed and I'm hyper and I'm active, or do I get it when I'm relaxed and resting and chilling and calm? Figuring out when there's a healing peak. Does that make sense? Is there any questions on that model specifically for now that anyone would love to ask?
I've got a question, John.
Nice.
So can you just so we've had some stressor, then we might get some symptoms that come through after that, but then we also might have different symptoms that are actually as we're normalizing again. Is that right? It's assessing whether we're on our way up or on our way down.
Yeah. It's really interesting. Like, this is one of the biggest lessons that people learn about this is, wow, actually what you're teaching me, or what I'm learning here, is I can actually be having symptoms when I'm getting better.
Right.
When the stress is no longer active. Yeah, there's a lot there's a lot of symptoms that are in regeneration phase. Pain, musculoskeletal pain and aches is actually a regeneration phase symptom. So it's not when you're stressed, it's actually when your body's starting to return and recover that you get the pain. Sometimes you'll ask a client, like, what's going on that's stressful, and they're like, you know, I'm not stressed. I feel like I'm probably in one of the better times of my life. And then it's like, oh, well, what are your symptoms? What are the organs and tissues that are related to that? Oh, those actually respond as you're healing. They cause problems. So that makes sense. So then what you have to figure out is, all right, great. So now we know that something improved. So what was it that improved? What stress were you under before that is linked to the symptoms? And the more you can know about the specific organs and tissues, the more that there's hidden wisdom in it.
Yeah.
I'll go into a little bit more of that in a minute, but
yeah.
yes.
I did some. I went through a thing a few years ago where I was losing my hair, really, like literally in handfuls in the shower, and I did some reading up on it linked to, you know, trauma and stress and everything else, rather than necessarily, you know, what disease have I got. And it was very interesting looking at the time lag there, that just in the cycle of your hair, that actually the stressor was probably 6 months before. It wasn't now, because of the cycle of how long your hair takes to both grow and then hold. And I was pretty sure that it was directly linked to a very traumatic thing that I'd gone through, but it had been maybe 6 months before, maybe 6 or 7 months before. And I think, you know, and anyway, then it came right. And so I don't know whether is hair loss usually well, I guess it can be both. I guess that's the other thing, can't it?
Yeah. Sometimes you have to go in and sort of find out someone's specific sort of experience that they're going through and stuff. But because even with pain, musculoskeletal pain, like, mostly it's in the regeneration phase, but sometimes it's more of a tension pain, and then it's like, well, I can see that you're stressed right now and you're getting the pain. So then it's more like, then this is stress phase. What specifically are you stressed about now? So yeah, sometimes it takes, like that personal one. Can I share a little insight on hair loss and just see if it rings true for you?
Yeah.
Because what we look at a lot with hair loss is what we call a brutal separation conflict. And
I would describe it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's sort of typically, yeah, loss of a loved one, or just, yeah, loss of self, brutal separation, is what we call it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. That was absolutely it.
yeah, and that's good, because then it can sort of help you to be like, okay, cool. So here's the wound I need to go and do some deep dive discovery on, my feelings and everything like that around that, and then that's where we direct the healing,
Yeah.
the healing work to strengthen ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome share. Thank you. So a little bit more. Oh, breakdown. Just to sort of ask you guys if you've ever felt these ways before. So some sort of common stress phase symptoms of the sympathetic phase. Can you guys think of any actually? So let me just bring that up. Can you think of what are some typical symptoms that one might experience during a sympathetic dominant phase or a stress phase? What might you experience?
Mine has been a lot of flight and freeze rather than fight. So I just get the urge to run out of the room, like I need to leave. Yeah, or the other thing is I freeze. I can't speak. I can't find my voice. So yeah, it tends to be one of the two of those. I've rarely done the fight one because I think that one was the one that happened a lot when I was a kid. So I've avoided that one because it was the one that was going on around me. So that, yeah.
Right, and that's it, isn't it? That's part of our conditioning, really, is like, I think we make a lot of unconscious decisions about what action is going to have the most benefits or rewards versus challenges, and sometimes when we have that fight response, it causes so much more intensity or a different type of intensity that sometimes it can get trained out of us. I know that was one of my things that I had when I was a kid, because there was threatening stuff, and I wanted to fight, but that was not socially acceptable and it caused other problems. And so it wasn't until I found the martial arts that it gave an outlet for it. But like you say, sometimes we can be more geared towards the flight, where we just got to run, and that's one of the sort of psychological changes that can happen as well, is we just need to escape from there as quick as possible. Or like you say, that freeze one, where we're just paralyzed, that we call them frozen moments. And that there's so much energy stored in that, that's stored in our body, stored in our unconscious mind, where we're just paralyzed. It's just energy that lives in our body, and every time it's re-triggered, it's like, it just adds layers and layers to it that can be seen on the brain, but also in the physiology.
Can I ask you? I've been diagnosed with CPTSD, and the freeze thing is quite intense physically for me now. My lungs, my chest feels like fright. Do you think EMDR is a good thing?
I've worked with it like a little bit, not that much. It's a process, and it seems like it's widely accepted. It's not been
It's not always a good sign though, because CPT is widely accepted, but they use it for everything now in mental health services, and I think you can't have one size fits all, can you really? So
no, that's it. And I haven't heard of or experienced many profound shifts with it, but I think some people have. What I would be more inclined to sort of is breath work. A lot of breath work, maybe some TRE, but some deeper work. I use a process called the Insight method. The Insight method is based on the work of Dr. John Demartini and the breakthrough experience, the Demartini method. But I use a guided meditation process that helps people to get into a certain state, and then we figure out what the stresses are, what the root of it is. We go through some changes, like some ways of thinking about it, and it's called the Insight method because we look at some insights. What are the lessons, blessings, and gifts that have happened from that event? It helps us to sort of change the balance of our perception around the event, and it helps us to release it by using some timeline therapy and taking the healing to specific moments. That's the most powerful method I've found that I use, is that one. But there are lots of methods you can use.
I guess anything you do that activates parasympathetic
Yeah,
is going to help
yeah, that's
you
it.
get out of it, because I think I've been living in flight and flight for a long time, you know,
Right.
that thing, and it's made me, you know, feel unwell in the end. But I think so, I like, you know, that's why going out in nature, like you say, breath work, or I don't know, music, whatever it is that gets you, I guess, in it, logically to me it makes sense then to activate the parasympathetic a bit more. Does
Yeah,
that make
that's
sense to
it.
you?
Yeah, and there's so the breathing technique that helps to stimulate the vagus nerve, which helps to support the parasympathetic nervous system,
Mm,
is breath work, at least 5 minutes, 6 seconds in, natural pause, 6 seconds out.
okay.
Yeah, deep diaphragmatic breathing. And it's been found that just 5 minutes of that diaphragmatic breathing, you know, 6 seconds in and then 6 seconds out. Just 5 minutes of that stimulates the vagus nerve and brings calm to the whole nervous system. The beautiful thing about breath work is the breath is the bridge between our conscious and our unconscious mind. It's the bridge between our mind and our body. So it's a thing that we don't really think about it, and we're constantly doing it, but we can bring it into our conscious awareness. And yeah, by practicing working with it, we can really begin to elongate our breath, because when we're stressed and we're, like you say, we're under fight flight all the time, we go upper respiratory breathing, we shorten our breath. It's like short and fast, right? And changes our body, makes us more acidic, or these lots of different changes, lots of tension in the neck and shoulders and everything. So yeah, just bringing that conscious awareness to it, to just do the deep diaphragmatic breathing in the morning when you wake up, sometimes even other times during the day. Sometimes I use it to fall asleep. If I'm having a particular time where I've got some insomnia and struggling with sleeping, just practicing that breath work until I wake up in the morning and I've drifted off, kind of thing. But yeah, just because it anchors us, it reminds us that we have a technique and a strategy to calm our nervous system down. And yes, it's just a simple process that you can do kind of anywhere.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So some of the main symptoms of the stress phase are so we have like stress, tense body, obsessive thinking, sleeplessness, absence of appetite, loss of weight, cold extremities, nervous and cold perspiration. So one of the ways, when you meet someone, you can tell if they're sort of stressed or even in regeneration, is by shaking their hand. Because if you shake their hand and their hand is like really cold, they're under sympathetic nervous system overdrive. They're like stressed. Because what the body does is, when you're stressed, it preferentially sends the blood shift away from the internal organs and to the skin, where it's helping with temperature regulation, to the skeletal muscles of the arms and legs, to help you with that sort of fight flight response. So if someone's always got cold extremities, they're sort of really under a constant sort of state of stress. Inability to focus. So Lisa, inability to focus. Yes, on you'd be acutely focused on the thing that you are stressful about. So the mind would want to be constantly thinking about or returning to the thing that you're stressed or traumatized by, because it's always wanting to bring you back to that. Because really what's going on in the mind is it wants to figure out how to overcome it, how to overcome this thing that's triggered us. So yeah, inability to focus. But there's another thing about regeneration phase that I want to bring up now as well, Lisa, is that when we go into regeneration phase, sometimes people have been getting confused a lot recently. They're like, I can't understand, like I'm forgetting things a lot more than usual. I'm more confused. I've got this like brain fog, even in chronic fatigue and things like that. It's a common thing, like brain fog, lupus, systemic lupus and stuff. And it's because of this constant shifting from stress to regeneration. But when we go into regeneration phase, we actually get a bit of brain fog. We actually get a bit confusion because our brain's sort of like reorganizing some things, and we're using a lot of energy for repair. And so we can get a bit of memory loss. Yeah, Reynolds, that's the one. It's like, it's the more sort of traumatized we are, the more it's like we our chi, our life force, our energy sort of starts to come back towards the core of us to protect the core of us. So yeah, you might sometimes find that, you know, there's this overwhelming stress or conflict that is paralyzing and worrying. There's a few other sort of definitions that you could go into there to be like what's going on, but there would be something to do with movement. Empowerment is the most important thing, because it's like some feeling of powerlessness to move. Yeah, with Reynolds. Yeah. Oh, that's a direct message. But yeah, we've got 10 minutes left. But yeah, so have you guys felt times where you've been in fight, flight, freeze and stress? Can you recognize some of those symptoms? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it just happens, right? We have these times. And then we have these other times where we're in more like what's called parasympathetic. It's more to serve metabolism, mainly between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. And so symptoms of the parasympathetic is like fatigue, tiredness, appetite returns, digestive organs get more blood, perspiration, can get fever, hot skin and body, warm body and extremities, weight gain, low blood pressure sometimes, slower heart rate and fever. So yeah, so when in the stress phase, everything's ramping up. When you're in a regeneration thing, everything's calming down. And sometimes if you shake someone's hand and they got a really warm or clammy hand, they've usually just overcome something. And actually maybe even because sometimes it happens with healing work, is just them arriving to work with you is a relief for them, because they know they're going to get help and they're going to get support. And so their body goes like, poof. Sometimes when I've been teaching, I've got into a situation where I've been teaching and I love this work so much, and it's so important to me to share it with people, that I've started to teach and I've gone through a regeneration. All of a sudden I start sweating and I'm like, oh no. And I know it's because like it's so linked to my purpose to share this work. But yeah, I didn't feel like the right time to sort of go through a regeneration. But yeah. But have any of you felt some of these ways where you've all of a sudden you've just been tired and you just needed to rest, and you didn't maybe know how long you needed to rest for, but you just knew that you needed to rest, and going through times of real regeneration?
I've witnessed it with my husband.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, because he had like 4 years of really difficult mental health problems and 2 bereavements, and then he was diagnosed with bipolar, and now he's stable. He's always hot, sweats a lot, is always tired.
Yeah.
And there's like so many of those symptoms that he's obviously going through like a massive regeneration phase from the experience that he had. You know, there's anything I can think, because a lot of those symptoms that were on that slide he's experiencing, because the difficulty he had lasted for a long time before he got the right sort of help and treatment and found his own stability with it.
Yeah, that's it. So I've come back out just to have like discussion. That can be something that definitely happens, is once we've actually found the help that we need, and now we feel supported by a community, healing is a community job. That's the most important thing to me about this Lighthouse Healing Academy and the M.O.E Foundation is to build a healing community. Healing happens in a community. We help and support each other. We hold each other. The more we can learn these principles and understand them, we integrate them into our being, so that when we see people go through like these symptoms, the physiological and the psychological, it just makes sense to us, because we're like, oh, we know what's happening. Oh, they're in stress phase. Oh, they're in regeneration phase. Oh, they've got some anxiety because they've been triggered by these events that have happened in their life. It's like, oh, okay, I can hold space for them now, because that's where they're at. And that's one of the biggest gifts about this is just learning how to hold space for yourself. Me personally, I went through some, like, I knew this work, and then I went through some major traumatic events in America that meant that I had like really profound like mania, and some anxiety and stuff. And it was like, just knowing this information doesn't make you immune to it. You're still a human. You still go through stress. You still go through conflicts or trauma. You still have pressures in your life. But at least it gives you like the understanding of why you're going through what you're going through. You understand what's happening. It definitely helped. It was like, well, I know. All right, so this relationship just broke up. I'm living in a hotel room. I'm paying like 3 days at a time. I understand like my situation and what's going on and what that's causing in me, and the fear, and why these symptoms exist. And I know that it's non-permanent. I know that it will. There will be a time that I'll move beyond this, and it will integrate. And then I did. I did some healing work, and I did the work. But that's what I want to really share with this work is so that you can have the skills, you can have the techniques, you can have the ability to hold space for yourself and others better when you're going through these conflicts. And it just makes sense of things. Because from your example there, Becky, like, we could get worried. We could be like, oh no, like, what's going on? Am I sick now because I'm sweating and I'm going through these regeneration phase symptoms? It's like, no, it's like you've been through, years of stress. This is your body processing it. Yeah. Any more? So I'll bring up that chat box again. I think some people have got to head off last winter, and lots of stress. I found that I was sleeping all the time. Yeah, 10 to 12 hours a night. Yeah, that's perfect. You're in a deep regeneration when you're needing that level of sleep. When I came back from America, a couple of years, I didn't have energy for anything. I had to sleep for and do not much for a year just to recover.
You talked about an epileptic episode, and as in not necessarily epilepsy, but that could be a heart attack, it could be a stroke, it could be. I have a very dear friend of mine who has developed epilepsy late. He's in his 50s, and it was definitely linked to the stress that he was under. He's not in this kind of space at all, and I'd love to be able to support him somehow. And it might just be being there as his friend, and we have like the 30+ year friendship, but I feel like I've got some knowledge, not to the level you have, but some knowledge in this kind of space, and I know it'll be linked to stuff. He has kids who have stuff as well that I know will be linked to this, and I don't know how to start introducing this kind of inquiry without it being woo-woo or forced upon or nuts, because his daughter's got ME, and his blah blah, his wife's suffering from depression. It's all around him, and I'd love to be able to support in some way, but I'm not. How do you find that, like, being able to broach this kind of work with people who perhaps sit more solidly in the mainstream?
Yeah, I think one of my things you have to learn with this is people will always come to the information at their own time.
Yeah.
You know, we like to think that it's
I
for
knew you were going to
everyone.
say that.
I know it's like it's one of those big frustrations that we've had to bump our head against for many years. You know, like even in my own family, I didn't feel understood for many years, but over time, like it was more easily understood. So I think, you know, offering the listening is the most important thing. That skill from the M.O.E training is the most important. Is
Mm,
the listening, is the hold space for them, and only when there's that feeling of readiness that, listen, I think you might be interested in coming along to a talk like this. you
mm,
know Look, I've got a workshop coming, maybe a book, find a book that might be a little thing, maybe a little YouTube video,
mm,
a short little thing that doesn't involve much commitment, a short video, and then it might spark further conversation and stuff like that. But
mm.
yeah, I think, yeah, the more I've just become embodied with the work, is like, this is who I am and this is what I teach, and I love it, and I think it's the most important thing. um People are, that there's a calmness that's come with that, and I don't, and then so it helps people to ask more questions,
Yeah.
and to sort of explore it from a completely like non-judgmental, like this is the answer. No, it's like, let's have a discussion, let's just have a chat about what potential things. But in terms of epilepsy, if I can just share some insight on it,
Mm,
it's one of the, it's sort of like, it's in the cortex layer of the brain, and it's the motor cortex typically, and it's like a territory fear conflict. Territory fear, there's usually the constellation piece of it, so there's threats and fears that are going on in our internal world, so like with our family and
yeah.
our intimate dynamics, our yin
Yeah.
stuff, and then also with the wider world, sort of like the job, the career, the sort of the larger sort of territory as well. And there's usually a stress going on in both of those, a bit of a
Yeah.
push pull. But yeah,
Yeah.
territory fear stuff.
Yeah. That's exactly what it was.
Yeah, yeah,
That's it. Spot on.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I ran out of time. I didn't get to share, I don't think, everything, but did you enjoy what we went through today? Do we get some good stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. And it's the start of a conversation. And so for those of you that are interested, so I've got a training coming up it starts on the 20th of January. It's a 5-week training. It's called Introduction to the Science of Illness, Health and Healing. We're going to be going through more in-depth principles and techniques, building on what we've done today. On my website, lighthousehealingacademy.com, there's, if you go down to the sort of courses page, the first course, it has a description of what we're going to be going through in it. And then and just click on there, register my interest, or email me directly, john@lighthousehealingacademy.com, Jon@lighthousehealingacademy.com. I said there's going to be 12 people in total, and I've got 6 places left because it was for the M.O.E community, so I didn't want to fill them up before we did this because it was mainly for the M.O.E community. So yeah, if you know you might love to do that and you want to find out more information, just email me or go on there and register your interest, and I'll email you over the next couple of days, tomorrow or the next day, and let you know how you can get signed up and enrolled into that program. But yeah, I hope I get to be with you on that, and go further with you. But yeah, you can email me. There's loads of messages. Let me just make sure I get it for you. Yeah, I could be with you guys and chat all night as well, Rachel. I love talking about this one. Like I could, yeah. That's why I was saying to the guys earlier, is it an hour and a half or 2 hours? Because I know we could easily go 2 hours or more. But I want to be respectful of your time and the agreement as well. So yeah, thank you for tonight, for showing up and being here, and I hope I answered any questions.